I never believed in the wilderness horror stories that circulated online like urban legends plucked from the subconscious minds of the fearful. I thought they were just exaggerated accounts spun by wannabe thrill-seekers seeking cheap thrills from others' unease. But if I had known what malevolence waited for me deep within that haunted forest, I would have never dared to venture into its shadowy embrace alone. It was a crisp Friday morning when I packed my gear, sunlight spilling across my yard like liquid gold as I loaded my car with the essentials. My rugged tent, sleeping bag that had seen its share of both comfort and discomfort, my trusty fishing gear, and that old camera my father had given me long ago. The excitement curled in my stomach, a familiar thrill that bubbled like carbonated fear. Anxiety that only a solo trip could elicit. I drove for hours, the asphalt beneath my tires unfurling into endless stretches of wilderness, leaving the haze of city smoke behind. I inhaled deeply, the fragrant aroma of pine and earth filling my lungs, promising the solitude and serenity I longed for. I smiled to myself, envisioning how liberating it would feel to disconnect from the world, even just for a weekend. But as I arrived at the trailhead, something felt amiss. An unsettling atmosphere hung in the air like a heavy fog. There was a profound stillness that gnawed at my gut from the very beginning. It wasn't just the absence of the usual weekend crowds. There were no friendly hikers waving hello, no laughter or camaraderie. Instead, an oppressive silence loomed, as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting. I shrugged off the feeling, convincing myself it was merely nerves. After all, I had camped alone plenty of times before. I unloaded my gear, the clinking of metal against metal echoing in the thick quiet, and set off down the trail. My boots crunched on the dried leaves, each step resonating into the eerie stillness that surrounded me. Every now and then, I would glance back, half expecting to see someone trailing at a distance, but the path remained devoid of life, shrouded in solitude. After an hour of hiking, I stumbled upon the perfect clearing. A flat patch of soil, hemmed in by towering trees whose ancient trunks stood sentinel, solemnly watching over me like silent guardians. Setting up my tent felt like building a cozy little fortress against whatever unwanted entities might be lurking nearby, unseen yet palpably felt. As dusk began to weave through the branches overhead, I lit a small fire to ward off the encroaching chill and settled in for the night, wrapping my fingers around the warmth. The first few hours were peaceful, but then the sounds began to creep in. At first, it was something as innocent as the shifting in the underbrush, the soft rustle of leaves that chased my heartbeat into a quickening rhythm. I told myself it was just animals, a deer perhaps or a rabbit, but deep down I knew it felt different. I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, of something or someone lurking just beyond the flickering radiance of the firelight, eyes perhaps boring into my very soul. I tried to immerse myself in my surroundings. The fire danced, the flames flickering and casting shadows that swayed ominously among the trees, elongating and twisting into grotesque shapes. I picked up my camera, feeling silly yet compelled to document my experience, as if doing so might somehow validate the reality of my fear. When I reviewed the footage later, I wished I hadn't. At that moment, however, a misguided bravery overcame me. As the night dragged on, I gathered my courage, edging away from the fire's comforting glow. It was then that I heard it, a distinct sound caught in the rustling leaves, a whisper that curled through the chilly air, so low that I thought I might have imagined it. I took a deep breath, rationalizing that it was just the wind playing tricks, or perhaps my anxious mind weaving shadows into sound. And yet, against all logical thought, I found myself responding, muttering softly into the darkness, "Hello!" The ensuing silence was overwhelming, thick enough to suffocate. Then came a sudden, solid crack of a branch snapping behind me. I spun around, my heart thundering in my ears, that primal instinct to flee surging forward. Nothing, only the oppressive darkness and that insistent feeling, the one I had futilely tried to ignore. I felt trapped in a web of vulnerability, stripped bare of the false comfort civilization once provided. In instinctive haste, I retreated to my tent, zipping the flaps shut as if that thin layer of fabric could possibly shield me from whatever was lurking beyond. Wrapped tightly in my sleeping bag, I quieted my racing mind. Outside, the forest came alive in the broken silence, and the soft whisper returned, sweeping just beyond the reach of my firelight. It was a voice, yet the words twisted and coiled in my gut, a language I could not decipher. Time dragged, feeling elastic as I battled an uneasy exhaustion that pulled at my consciousness. Just when I thought sleep might grant me a moment of respite, I felt a cold rush sweep through the tent, brushing against my skin like icy fingers frolicking through the night. The whispers intensified, now accompanied by a low, mocking laughter, a hollow sound that sent icicles spiraling straight down my spine. I wanted to leave. I itched to bolt, to escape, to flee into the embrace of civilization. But I was deep in the wilderness, miles from my car. It was as if the ominous voice echoed my own desperate thoughts, drawing an insidious pleasure from my terror. I felt paralyzed, my heart pounding with a ferocity that threatened to burst from my chest while shadows loomed outside my tent, twisting into shapes that crammed my throat with fear, choking the breath from my lungs. Finally, the courage swelled within me, propelling me to peer outside. My flashlight flickered erratically, its beam wavering as I caught sight of movement. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing, just outside the fragile reach of my campfire's glow. My breath hitched, catching in the tightness of my throat. For a split second, I thought I saw a face, pale, distorted, and smiling. But I blinked, and it was gone. The laughter faded, replaced instead by a chilling silence that devoured all sound. I stumbled back inside, tripping over my own feet in my haste. I listened hard for the sound of footsteps, yet it was as if the forest had swallowed those sounds, leaving only the consuming quiet behind. The hours stretched before me endlessly, merging into nights without stars. My mind churned with possibilities and terror, and I couldn't tell how much time passed. Too frightened to sleep and too terrified to move, I grabbed my camera with shaking fingers, desperate to capture whatever essence lurked out there. But in that moment, my foot slipped, knocking the flashlight loose, and darkness swallowed me whole. When the soft light flickered back on, illuminating the interior of my tent, I gasped as reality crashed over me. I realized I was not alone. The inside of my tent had descended into chaos, items strewn about as if someone had rifled through my gear with careless abandon. My heart nearly burst from my chest when I saw what had been left. A collection of fresh leaves and sticks, neatly arranged in a circle on the damp ground. They resembled offerings, perhaps. My mind reeled, grasping for rational explanations, each one slipping further from my grasp. Panicking, I clumsily unzipped the tent and burst outside, ready to confront whatever had come for me. But I was met with the same suffocating silence, the trees swaying gently as if mocking my fear. I could hear my own breath, loud and hurried, mingling with the pounding rhythm of my heart. Then, I noticed something on the ground, a trail of what appeared to be footprints, leading away from my camp. My brain screamed urgent warnings, urging me to run, to heed the primal instinct honed sharp over hours of dread. Yet, against my better judgment, sick curiosity pushed my feet to follow the path laid out before me. With each step, the air grew heavier and thicker, pressing against my skin until it felt like traversing through molasses. The primal urge to turn back clawed at me, but an unseen hand compelled me deeper into the shadows where the trees twisted and beckoned, their gnarled branches reaching out like the fingers of the damned. I finally realized what I was tracking. The footprints were small, unnaturally small. They ended abruptly in a clearing clear of the usual underbrush, as if something had awaited my arrival. And it was in that moment that I heard the voice again, but it wasn't coming from the trees. It vibrated inside my head, alive with malevolence, making me battle the urge to scream. "Stay," Just stay." I turned and ran, tearing through the branches and undergrowth, fear propelling me faster than I ever thought possible. Out of breath and panic-stricken, I finally stumbled back to my tent, adrenaline blurring my thoughts. I grabbed my gear, throwing it together wildly as I prepared to escape. But something held me still. I realized the camera. I had to capture it, this horror. I looked back, noticing a shadow creeping at the edge of my camp, and flicked on the flashlight. The beam caught it, just for an instant, an indistinct shape, swaying like a marionette guided by unseen hands, and then it vanished. Grabbing my gear, I raced back down the trail, not stopping until I reached my car. The forest felt alive behind me, the shadows reaching out and clawing at my back as I sped away. I didn't look back. I never dared to stop until the city's lights erupted like stars piercing the veil of night behind me. Now, whenever I try to close my eyes, I hear the whispers and see the branches clawing at my car window like skeletal fingers desperate to snatch me back. That forest, with its chilling echoes, has claimed a piece of me. I thought my solo camping trip promised peace, but it devolved into a living nightmare. If you've ever felt something watching you from the shadows, you might understand. Subscribe to The Dark Witness. You may uncover truths hidden within the tales of madness lurking just beyond the trees. Some stories aren't merely told. They're lived, and they carry the burden of the damned. Be mindful whenever you venture into the wilds, because sometimes you may find something waiting far worse than loneliness.